Edward Snowden, an American hero or government nuisance for leaking those classified NSA documents. Let's put him through the spin cycle. Guys, this is, at least in my opinion, this is complicated stuff. I, for one, don't like leakers. I don't like whistleblowers. I think it's a matter of integrity that when you're in a job and that job is to keep secrets, then you're supposed to keep those secrets, both because of the information itself, the content, because it's something you said you would do, and because you can't possibly know everything there is to know about how dangerous revealing that information will be. Now, I also put whistleblowers who tell the public about, say, the dangers of cigarette smoking or that their water is polluted. I put them in a different category than whistleblowers or leakers who reveal national security information and risk national security. I think they are fundamentally different. That said, I very much would want to know that the government can now take my phone and email records without a warrant or a subpoena. That is something I would like to know. I'd prefer to put that in the no category. So I can not like the leaker and love the leak. I can like the information, not love the informant. Again, I don't have policy recommendations based on that. That's the hard reality for someone in my position where I'm asked to sort of pick a side about this. There's no easy side for me. The only easy side I know is when it comes to the media, that's a red line. The government does not go after the media for the prosecution of whistleblowers and leakers.
Right. I mean, the thing is that for us, knowing that information actually makes us less safe, because that's one of the tools that the government has been using to keep us safe. Us knowing it, the terrorists know it. So now the mouse has run over here, and we have to build a new mousetrap to catch the mouse. That makes us less safe. I'm uncomfortable calling Snowden a whistleblower. He is a leaker, and what he
calls himself that, though.
Well, yeah, I know. He calls himself a lot of things, right? But I'm not going there, right?
Okay.
And, you know, what he's done is he's taken advantage of the post-9/11 directive that we need to share information. We need it to be on a need-to-share, not a need-to-know basis. That was
and he gets to make that decision.
Right. So every person who enters this intelligence community, Bradley Manning, Edward Snowden, gets to say, well, I don't like what I can see. I can see this part of the game. I don't like it, and I'm going to let the world know about it and blow it up. I'm not comfortable with that. I think in the modern world, given the technology and the terrorist threat that we have to live with every single day, that the surveillance state is going to be a requirement, right? Now, what sort of surveillance state are we going to live with? That's what we have to ask ourselves. I think most Americans understand that there's going to be a trade-off between privacy and what the government needs to know. And most Americans are comfortable letting the government encroach on our privacy a little bit to get that preventative counterterrorism going.
Well, you know, until last week, most Americans had no idea what was going on and how much of their information was being used and potentially abused because they'd never been told, not by this president, not by the prior president, not by the leadership of the NSA, not by the reports to Congress under the Patriot Act and the FISA Amendments Act, which have been woefully misleading, as we've been reporting on this show with experts. So what people know based on what they don't know, what people know based on lies and deceptions from their government, doesn't give us a full picture of public opinion. Count me out of the ignorant surrender crowd to the national security state. Count me out. You got 3+ million people with security clearances. You've got the Fourth Amendment being shredded, and you've got the FISA court giving blanket surveillance orders, which, again, as we've discussed, but some people don't fully grasp, that means we've gone from a court that rubber stamps most requests but looks at them individually to, after 2008, with the collaboration of both parties, blanket surveillance of the phone records. And what we know is it probably doesn't stop with Verizon. We haven't confirmed that, but anyone who's looked at the pattern here would think that this is business lines of all the telephone companies, plus the web. So you don't have to like the criminal behavior of government officials, which obviously they've broken rules in a couple of these cases, to see what's going on. And as for the excitement about prosecuting these people, I don't see the same excitement when it comes to the leaks out of the White House to defend targeted killing, which are just as criminal. And I don't see, until very recently, the same appetite in the military-industrial complex to deal with the rampant sexual abuse and rape in the military. So yes, we have a justice system. I think everyone can come together on that. But selective prosecution against the people who put the most at risk to tell us things that our government refuses to tell us is very alarming. That's the context.
But what if the New York subway had blown up? because we hadn't been following terrorists that are in America trying to plot these things. You want to be counted out of that. Well, what about that? Then what? Would you be comfortable with that? Because that's one of the things that this program has been able to uncover and stop. So you want to be out of that, but do you want to be in that? Because that's what you get.
The argument that security should trump all other values, including potentially our rights in the Constitution, whether that's the right to vote, the right to speak, or the right to unreasonable search and seizure, yes, I will defend in my advocacy in any way I can all of those rights. And we've heard a lot of governments throughout the world use security as a justification for everything. You know, in North Korea, they have a little box in every home. You can see it. We have a box that you can't see, which is on the internet, and some people say you're inclined to lower privacy. And the Supreme Court has actually implied some of that. But if you want to go to North Korea and say, I got a box in every home, I feel safer, fine. You might be literally a quantum safer, but you're not more free.
I think that we can probably all agree on the careful balancing that has to happen with our civil rights and civil liberties and national security. And the most important thing I think that we often forget in this conversation is this didn't just start last week because Edward Snowden thought that this would be a good idea. This started with the Patriot Act.
Yep.
And if there are things that are wrong in the Patriot Act, as several members of Congress raised, several community activists and others raised, then we need to look at that. We don't need to start with PRISM. We need to go all the way back to what actually brought us here. And yes, you do have to balance national security. This is not black and white. This is gray, and we do have to protect the safety and security of American people.
Yeah, and if you look at what's in the Patriot Act, to your point, we pulled a couple of lines. This is from a Supreme Court opinion describing it, where we talk about that the Patriot Act eliminated the individualized targeting, which I mentioned. It authorized a programmatic or dragnet surveillance in the amendments in 2008, but those were to the underlying Patriot Act. It's only gotten worse, in my opinion. And third, it basically limited the court's power to supervise limits on privacy intrusion procedures. That's basically things the court can do to try to keep a handle on this. So that's the larger context. We have had the Congress basically open this up further and further and further until there is no court oversight in any meaningful way on an individual basis. Then when you combine that with the history of surveillance in America, where you had Martin Luther King and the Black Panthers and Muhammad Ali and Abby Hoffman and political opponents and Malcolm X targeted sometimes illegally and sometimes right on that line. Combine that with the fact that in 2009 the New York Times said this NSA program, which we now know was larger than we were told at the time, was used to illegally go into President Bill Clinton's email. Okay, the security points run both ways, right? When you have it run amok and you don't have the oversight. So I do think it's complicated. I do think people of good will disagree, but we have got to bring this back under some oversight.
I completely agree. And this administration can't just keep picking winners and losers when it comes to good leaks and bad leaks. Then they lose credibility on all of it. And the American people need to know who the enemy is, who is the acceptable target, and we need to have, again, some rules of engagement here and some consistency. All right, the debate will certainly continue on Edward Snowden, so we put it to you, is this guy a criminal or a whistleblower?